supporting our public schools are and how beneficial it can be to our community. First off, I'm going to introduce myself. Hey, for those of you that don't know, I'm Christopher Hamilton. I'm a junior at Urbana High School. I've played on the soccer team, the swim team. I'm the drum major for our marching band, and I also run track this spring. School has been one of the most informative parts of my life. That's why I think it's so important that I need to tell everyone how much of a benefit it can be for all of the children in our community. When I first started thinking about education and this issue, I looked to the past for some of our great thinkers and leaders for insights they may have had. And President Franklin Roosevelt once said that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. He described a list of self-evident rights that would help ensure economic security. And among that list, he declared the right to a good education. Well, let's think about that. If education can help ensure economic security, and economic security ensures freedom, then in a country where we value freedom as one of our highest virtues, then shouldn't it be of utmost importance to support education as well? Another one of the rights President Roosevelt spoke about was the right to a useful and remunerative job. In today's world, a well-paying job is increasingly hard to find without an education. Therefore, to ensure that future generations can obtain the necessary jobs, they will need a good education. Employers want well-trained and educated employees, and it is imperative that our schools educate our future generations to meet that ever-raising standard. This is quite a tall order, and is increasingly difficult for our teachers and our educators, as funding for schools continues to stagnate or decrease, but the costs continue to rise. Education needs to be among our highest priorities, especially now that we live in a world where innovation and ideas are so crucial to success. Yet education seems to have been put on the back burner in today's political agenda. And some of the things that we need to do in our education system is we need innovation of education. And instead of being satisfied with the tried and true ideas of days past, we need to look forward and figure out new and better ways to educate our youth. And educators also need to be in tune with the demands of employers. And today, we try to educate our students to be as best prepared as they can for college. But in some cases, that's not the path they need to go. Sometimes they need a different kind of education that will prepare them for jobs that are not college bound. And finally, we need to let our teachers teach. They are the people that know how our students will learn. And having state boards that are far removed from the classroom, making important decisions that affect the classroom, can be incredibly burdensome on some of our teachers. Especially when such state boards ask that teachers meet more and more standards, but give them no more funding to meet such standards. An example of that came just this year as the state passed down a new set of tests that our teachers had to administer. And when my favorite math teacher was describing to us why we had to take this test, he was telling us that this test was so that the state could measure how well he was doing as a teacher. But he told us that that's not what he cares about. He asked us to do our best on the test. He wanted us to do our best, not only so that the state would see how he was as a teacher, but because he cared what we were learning as students. And he didn't care about the state's ideas of him. He wanted to know what we had learned. I think that's an important thing. We don't need to have extra rules and things placed on teachers unnecessarily. Kids learn differently in very different parts of the state. So where in one classroom in Columbus, they might learn one way, and we may learn very differently here in Urbana. So having state tests that measure how well a teacher is doing in all parts of the state can be unnecessary and burdensome on the teachers. When they should be the ones measuring how we are doing. Now, I want to change gears here and talk about how education is not only important to the students, also to the community. When schools are educating their youth and giving an excellent education, the community will prosper. Businesses will be attracted because they know that well-taught students are coming from that community. Small businesses included, and will see that that's where they want their children. And those business owners will want their children to go to those schools and get an excellent education. And all people want their children to get a good education. They will move into those communities seeing that a bright future for their children. Now, some of the drawbacks if you do not support the schools can be seen here in Urbana. One of the things that my father and I have talked about, when he went to school, he graduated in a class of nearly 250 students. Now, since that time, Urbana's population has not changed that drastically, but my graduating class this next spring will be barely over 100. And so we're having a drastically changing demographic here in Urbana, where we can see that children are not coming into the community and they're not as large a portion of the community as they used to be. That is something that we can possibly change with more support to the schools. Some of the drawbacks, for those of you that don't know, Urbana City Schools has several buildings. They're some of the oldest in the state. Our newest building, East Elementary, it was built back in the 1950s. Whereas other schools right here around us, Mechanicsburg, Triad Graham, are all much more recent. And some of the problems that come from having such old buildings is that we have a very low accessibility for those that are handicapped. Unfortunately, only one of our buildings is handicapped accessible through all parts of it, making it nearly impossible for those of us less fortunate and with disabilities to go to Urbana City Schools. And the cost of fixing these schools rather than finally renovating and building new ones is becoming higher and higher. As many of you probably know, this last year we had to close Urbana Local in an effort to save costs. It was one of the oldest and hardest to keep in shape schools in our district. And should funding continue to drain away from schools, unfortunately, they need to be redirected towards the sheriffs, the courts, and the criminal justice systems here in the county. As many of us can probably understand, as schools lose funding and less children are graduating, crime rates usually go up in that community. And in our county, we spend $12 million on the total county budget. Of that, almost half, $5.6 million, goes to the various departments for the criminal justice system. And of that $5.6 million, only about $1 million goes to the actual employees of those departments. The remaining $4.6 million, a hefty portion of the county budget, is going to the associated fees for the criminals and the upkeep of the criminal justice system. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't properly fund those systems. We live in a civil society and treat our inmates with respect. But you can see how, if that were to rise, that's not the greatest use of our public funds, and we'd much rather be using it in places like education. whereas the Urbana City School budget for the district in 2013 was over $21 million. Of that, half of it went entirely to the employee's salary. And we can see how that is a much better use of our tax dollars and how that can benefit the community in much better ways. Urbana City Schools had nearly 2,100 students enrolled in the district for 2013. And serving that many students and helping that many people rather than the unfortunate spending for inmates and their associated costs. So finally, the choice is yours. It's understandable that in tough times, helping and support the schools may seem like a distant concern. But if the schools prosper, so too will the community. You can deny support to the schools, and they will struggle to meet that increasing burden of educating students for the modern world. Or you can give the help they need from the community and aid them in preparing our young people to be prosperous members of society. I just ask that you remember the importance of your decision. It can impact the future generations for many years to come. And keep all of these points in mind because a bond issue is likely to come up here in our community for new schools here in Urbana. I want to thank my grandfather for letting me speak tonight. Thank you all for your attention. Have a good evening.